Yeah, I mean, I definitely branch them two ways. I do think there is one that is an unhappy life, that is it is actually the fear of that unhappy life is the main core fear, and then death. And then I have observed it isn't always one's own death. Sometimes it is more about other people's death. So I do think there is some slight variation there. Now, I think it's up for debate, whether everyone really does have, a core fear of death. I mean, I'm personally on the side that I think they do, and that's terror. I mean, what terror management theory says is that people are just well defended against that. So, they buffer against it with self-esteem and, their sense of self, and you just can't touch that fear. Whereas those of us, and not everyone with OCD, because I just had someone this week who was like, "Oh yeah, I'm not scared of dying myself, but it's just the inconvenience that this will have, if this turns out to be cancer and for my family." So, again, was she telling the truth? I think she genuinely felt that, but was it the defense was strong? So I mean, I land there, but there certainly are examples where people meet death with very little obvious fear. And okay, are they just well defended, or do they have beliefs that ameliorate that, or are they just very much tapped into their courage at that point, and that is a strong force that can kind of overcome fear actually, and or help you get through fear. I think it's that, I think people can just tap into that courage. And we have a rehearsal for that. We have thousands of rehearsals for that in the form of panic and ongoing anxiety. That's how I see it. We have lots of practice. um I think for me, what was helpful for this was like not was and this is really gets to the heart of my sort of recovery. Was like I was working on um lots of themes, like at the end of my recovery, but health anxiety was a big one, and there was a lot of death anxiety as part of it. And I was talking to the ERP therapist that I work with just briefly. I only did 3 sessions with him, but I was talking about this, and he, that there was this sort of sense that, yeah, oh yeah, you could just habituate to this fear. And I was sitting there going, like, no chance, like no chance. And then it really struck me, well, the goal is to get better with fear. That's the goal. That's an achievable goal. And then that achieves the same end, right? And if I truly do have strong psychological flexibility skills in the face of fear, then I've got what I'm looking for. And that is trainable. That is, you can practice that, you can cultivate that, you can get many, 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 many times better with fear, including very intense fear. And I know that myself because I've done it, over and over. Um, so that's the kind of way I see it. Like, not everyone, even on this call, there'll be some people that it just doesn't resonate. This particular manifestation of OCD, just they'll think, no, I'm not that scared of death, or it doesn't feel like it goes back to death. And like, fair enough. I'm not pushing this idea on anyone. And okay, let's identify it then. Is it more unhappiness? Is it other people's other people's harm? And then guilt, guilt can be a big one, just the unbearable feeling of guilt for the rest of my life, or other things like that. So I kind of agree with you ways, but I think sometimes it's a little bit more more nuanced than this. So I guess like my goal when I was doing that exposure, so I would just, I did write out scripts, but I did it, very in my imagination. And it was just sort of tracking through, I get the terminal diagnosis. So I'd do that scene, and then I'd work my skills, I'd diffuse, I'd accept, I'd engage in the moment. Then okay, next frame, I'm in a hospice and I'm, dying away. And obviously it's not a very pleasant thing but it was very helpful, so I sort of build up with that. And then to lights out, gone, I do that whole sequence, and just work that sequence, and then do my skills. Like, and then obviously you can do other things to do this. You can do kind of movies, or hear people talking, people who are terminal in their diagnosis, or, there are other ways of doing it. You can, as a therapist, I get to work with people who are dying at times and things like that. So, you know, you can do that by volunteering and, going and helping, or, there are ways of doing that too. Um, I think, again, OCD is so much about uncertainty. You don't know that you can't cope with this. That's the thing. Like, your mind's going out, there's no way, like, I can kind of, but you don't actually know that. Like, that's the thing to remember again. It's just another uncertainty, because actually there's loads of times when people with anxiety disorders actually cope amazingly well in crisis, including the end of their life. The example I often use is my gran had had a lifetime of anxiety disorder. Well, she'd had a lot of anxiety disorders, not OCD, but a lot of anxiety and stuff. And my two grandpas were both men's men, brave, Air Force, very heroic, at the ultimate, and I say that jokingly. I'm not joking about their heroism in the war, but more their personalities. And they would joke with me, so they wouldn't mind me joking about it. But they were a lot more typical kind of. I mean, I looked at my grandpas growing up, and I was like, these are the bravest men I could imagine. And I saw both of them near the end of, you know, I saw one of them die, and I saw one of them at the end of his life. And both of them were frightened at times, So again, someone, and if you'd asked them, and I did actually, I asked them growing up what they thought about death, and they were like, no, I'm not afraid of death, not at all. And then my gran, she was ready to go. So she wasn't frightened at all. So she was very scared of lots of things throughout her life. So again, I just don't think we know. So one good thing is to accept the uncertainty with that, is you don't know how you would cope with it. um and then the other thing is, okay, let's get better with, back to fear of fear. Let's get really good with fear, and you can get infinitely better with fear, and that's something you can achieve. And then let's see how that goes. Yeah. So that's how I look at it. If anyone's not, this isn't, don't see this as like a fixed topic. You could apply this to unbearable feelings for the rest of my life. That's my core fear. I'm more worried about unhappiness because I feel disgust, or I have this thought stuck, or something like that. Well, actually, no, we can do the same with that fear of being unhappy. We can get infinitely better with that difficulty, and do the same thing there. If it's fears around others, yeah, we can do the same there, because we don't want to be overwhelmed with those fears of others and not be able to actually be there for the people we're afraid of in the life when we are with them. So we're focused in on death, topic I love. Um, and But really, it's the same for any of the core fears. It's not specific to that. And yeah, I mean, I think you can get, another way of viewing it as well is like, I do like Stephen Phillipson sort of talks about this, that things around death, they're no different to any other OCD theme. It's just an intrusive thought that happens to be about that, and we can do the same with that as we do with anything else. Now, who knows what that means for the end of your life, but it's what it does for this life that's important. So again, we want to just teach the brain it doesn't need to be thinking and tracking and on that all the time. It needs to be on living life. And I guess that's the flip side of this topic, is if we can flip it around, okay, that's where the meaning is, that's where the connection is, that's where the, savor every moment. And I did this today. I was outside for a bit, and I looked at the beauty of nature, and I had my daughter sleep, she was sleeping on me, and I did think about death, and I did think, how beautiful this is and wonderful this is. And it was like that memento mori idea from the Stoics of like, remember this and use it to help you. And I would say use it in your recovery, use it to remember that your life is important. You don't want to be looking back in the end of your life going, I didn't go for it with my OCD recovery. We want to be like, yeah, I went for it. Um, so that's the other side of it, is can we use that as that kind of momentum or a inspiration to live our lives. I would say, I really went into it with the goal of getting more comfortable in strong emotions. So quite quickly at that point, that came at the end of lots of other lots of hard work in other ways and things. But it happened fairly quickly, and it was, I could have a wave of terror and just notice it and be with it and engage in life and choose where I focused. I could I could sort of bring on the intrusive thoughts by, focusing on this image and story, and I could observe them and not react, not do anything. And then I could move away from the practice afterwards and focus on whatever I would do next, including I often did it at nighttime because that was the only time that I had at that point that seemed to fit sometimes. And me previously would never have done that at nighttime. I'd be like, oh my God, I'm gonna have panic attacks at night. I'm not gonna sleep. And, so I could move from that into sleep and be with the terror wasn't as high, but it, there was some baseline anxiety. I could let that be there and relax around it into sleep. So that sort of stuff. I mean, for me, this was one part of the equation. The other part was continuous use of skills in the moment. So that was the big thing where I noticed shift the most actually. Like in these, sometimes these practices weren't that hard actually. It just wasn't landing. Still felt useful, but it wasn't landing. But then it would be kind of carry on that same process into life as my mind's just throwing me endless intrusive thoughts, or I'm feeling really difficult feelings or whatever it might be. Um, so then that was like, how well do I do with the anxiety? Can I, be in that sort of state and still have a conversation and be focused with someone? When I was more depressed, it was, can I activate and get moving and focus and stay with stuff and not be in the pain and the exhaustion and the sort of suicidal thoughts. Um, Depersonalization, it was, yeah, can I have less tracking and monitoring of that experience? Can I be more focused out? So seeing those things sort of shift. So the exposure shifted quite quickly, and then it was bringing it into life, But that was at the end. I mean, I'd had 3 rounds of ERP with a couple of very famous clinicians, and I'd been working on mindfulness stuff and ACT stuff for quite a while and things. So it was, it wasn't like an overnight thing, but yeah. So I mean, I think the best goal you can set is like, if it's intrusive thoughts, get really comfortable with them, ping in and not reacting, not doing anything to them, not, eventually not even paying much attention. Like to begin with diffusion, but later on just letting it be there. The same with the feelings, like getting, more comfortable in the difficult feelings, and then better at focusing out, setting those goals and just seeing how you do with that, really tracking that. Because they're things you can control. So they're good things to track. How willing am I to have my mind just throw me difficult stuff? How willing am I to have the feeling? And how present can I be, with all that going on? They're things we can control, so they're good to track. That's where my approach is a little bit different, because we're building the skills strong enough that we're not feeling we're out of our depth and we're doing something that's sort of, blowing us. I mean, re-traumatizing to me is that it reactivates the compulsions of sort of monitoring and amplifying the panic and, struggling with the intrusive thoughts, and then that the trauma is what overwhelms our nervous system. But if our skills are strong enough, it's not easy, but it won't re-traumatize you. So it's about going back a step. If we're thinking like this is feels like it's re-traumatizing, okay, let's work our skills a bit more. Let's do something easier until I feel like actually I'm willing to do that. Um, and yeah, I mean, yeah, let's come back to, I mean, that's the short answer.